Let's see here. I don't think I have anybody in here yet. Yeah, can you? If you can hear me, put a 1 in the chat. If you can hear me, put a 1 in the chat. I just want to make sure that's right. Make sure I get that volume right. Make sure y'all can hear me. Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me. Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me. Like I said, put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me. Put a 1 in the chat. There we go. Got a few ones there. A few ones there. Dang, we're live. Here we are. Let's see. Let's get some more people in here before I really start telling some stuff. No, I'm just playing. Dang, I just woke up from a nap too. You ever wake up from those naps where you're just like you're out? It's over. Like life is over, as existed, and then all of a sudden you rise up, and you're like not quite there. That's me right now. Let's see here. I want to be able to. We got, okay, 2 people. Hey, that's okay. 2 people. I'll take it. All right, let's get this show rolling. I'm only going to go about an hour. What's going on, guys? My name is Yahola Tiger. I'm the host of I guess you could say, the War Cry podcast. I'm also a host of of Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. I'm going to try to do these once a week. That's kind of the goal. This episode here is going to actually be used for for my live podcast. I guess really my podcast for this week's episode. And so I'm going to be telling some stories. You just never know who's going to show up. You know, last week I had Russell Sun Eagle from Okie Podcast. He came on and blessed us with his presence. So you just never know who's going to come on. But I had just recently, I guess, I had done a review on Yellowstone, just like a short kind of, I guess you'd say a little, probably a 5-minute, not even 5-minute kind of thought about it. But I had been thinking, as I've continued to watch it, and the new prequel show of I think it's 1923. I'm going to be honest with you, man, that hit me a different type of way. Like, it hit me kind of almost like just kind of angry. Like, I just immediately got mad about it. And basically what's going on is the Duttons have then established themselves, and they are now, solidified. But the part that really bothers me is the boarding school stuff in Yellowstone's prequel series 1923. That just really, really bothers me, because it's just, you got these Irish Catholic nuns, and you have these different religious groups, I guess, Christian type things, and it just bothers me, man. The stuff they're doing to those girls, it's just like, it hit me on a different level, and it just made me so uncomfortable. Like, I was like, man, I don't know if I can watch this, because basically, they were, cutting hair and, beating these girls, and it shows it, like in the show, it shows these girls getting beat down, trying to beat the savage out of them. And that's one thing that I always get real kind of offended about, is when I hear people, tossing around like stuff don't matter. Like, it's just not something that, I get real offended by that. Like, it's just meaningless. But, my grandma, she was actually at a boarding school for a little bit. And she also went to Talcott Sequoia dormitory too as well. So, I'm not saying Sequoia was that way, but she had went to a Catholic boarding school at some point in her life when she was an orphan. And that really, it kind of took me back to like my grandma, her being in that position where, so stuff ain't always right, it ain't correct. It's just, just real nasty behavior from people that supposedly believe in forgiveness and things like that. So I just thought it was real cool, especially when it came to, not really cool, but I just thought it was real kind of cruel that, that they would show that on TV. I was real surprised by that. That was pretty wild. But yeah, that's Yellowstone's 1923. Now I still stand by what I said. I think it was episode 5. I can't remember. Some of these episodes kind of run together, but I stand by that. Indians be acting crazy. We be acting crazy to each other for like no reason. We be all kind of, how I say, real polite and pleasant and courteous to each other in public, and dang, we be stink to each other. Real stink, and that's kind of one thing that, like I said, on Yellowstone, that's real prevalent with that chairman race. You got the young buck who is trying to do the new stuff, which, ain't nothing wrong with that new stuff, but there's some elders out here, that we still need to listen to, and so that's kind of just a battle. But yeah, I mean, I'm rehashing that, but yeah, that 1923, man, it's brutal. If you want to watch it by Yellowstone and get real kind of like, another thing too that they did highlight in that, and its abuse is basically like sexual abuse of that girl that's the main character. One thing too that, some of those, we always kind of have a misconception of it's men on boy or men on girl, but, in that show, it shows a woman on that girl and touching her inappropriately and not doing, the Christian thing or the Catholic, and it really bothered me. And I was just like, man, it's almost too much. And I kind of almost had to quit watching it for a second, kind of just had to step back from it. But that's, like I said, that if y'all want to go watch that, it's a good show. Don't get me wrong. It's a decent show. It's kind of boring in some aspects with 1923, but it's brutal. It's brutal. But let's see here. We got somebody. Oh, the Family 2. Yeah, Family 2. Dang, they really be stink too. They'll be on Facebook. Dang, that's crazy. What's going on, Amy, in the chat? Yeah, that second episode was super dry. It was like super, super dry. But yeah, Family be doing the same thing. Like I see it, and then like this may be shade to some people, but it is what it is. We act all nice on Facebook, like everything's okay, like everything ain't oh it's roses, it's peaches and cream, it's all this nice look, but we kind of stink behind the scenes. So I mean, if you feel like that's on you, then that's on you, but that's that way too. They be like that too, family sometimes, but I had been kind of thinking, what I was going to talk about tonight. I had been thinking about this about all day. And I had posted a picture on my Facebook. It's Yahola Tiger on Facebook. It was of these lockers that are in my at my work, where I work. And I've been thinking about that. And then I started thinking about snakes. We had a conversation. I had a conversation with a former, or he's a retired park ranger and a forest ranger, and basically, someone that does a lot of upkeep and stuff like that. And we were talking about deer, and we were talking about kind of the habits of deer. And I asked him, I said, what you think about, if you see anything weird out there? And he goes, no, I get this question all the time. It's like, it's someone's always, thinking Bigfoot's around, or, and it's a hoax. And that's what he said. he said a lot of times when he would run into different Bigfoot claims would be hoaxes. People would be dressed up as Bigfoot, or doing stuff to people or pranking people, and he really went into detail about that. Like, I was thinking, like, man, he must have got this question a lot. He's probably tired of answering it, and this is the final time now. But he definitely kind of talked about. I asked him just a basic, like a hunting question, and I asked him basically about deer and what deer do, and what how they stay away, and how they kind of stay away from humans. And basically, he said a deer can smell you no matter what you put on. So you put that deer piss on, you can put anything, and they're still gonna smell you. They don't think it's weird, and they're gonna think they think if it's a weird smell, it's a human. I always kind of thinking about Bigfoot or Sasquatch. That makes me think about that sometimes. That made me think about it immediately, even though he said it was a hoax, and I was like, come on now, big dog. Like, there's all these people say they've seen it, and there's all, tribes have been saying that this is another race of people for all these years, and now you want to say that it's a hoax? Like, come on, big dog. Like, what are you talking about? So, let's see here. I want to make sure. Okay. But that got me really thinking about, these snakes. And when I think about these snakes that are out in these waters, I really start kind of thinking about all the stories that I've heard, and how kind of scary these snakes are. And a story growing up, and I have not really told this story, but this story involves medicine. But I'm not going to go into the medicine part. I'll just go into what happened. But my grandma was in a real bad relationship with somebody, in her later life. And she was trying to leave, essentially. Trying to get out of that situation. And when she got across a certain part of this bridge, it's a well-known bridge in Tahlequah area, her car broke down, and she tried to get to start, and all of a sudden she looks down, and she kind of looks and she kind of looks like down to pop the hood, and she's like really kind of really trying. She's real shook up, trying to get out of the situation, and she pops the hood and opens up the hood and looks down in there, and there's this big snake around that engine. And medicine and these snakes have been going on for years and forever. And you got to be real disciplined using it when it comes to using that medicine, that snake medicine. Because if you're not living right, it'll affect you in other ways. Make you lose your mind, make you do all types of stuff. And, I really think about that story, quite often, probably once or twice a week when I think about her. And I just start thinking about my time, on the river at the Illinois River in Tahlequah. But I think one of the stories, one of the telltale signs of these snakes, and I mentioned this on the Water Monsters episode with Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation, but these things, they moo. And I can't tell you how many friends I've had who, they literally were like, man, what's going on? Like, they're like, man, what? Like, they tell me, like, man, I heard the weirdest thing out. I was thinking maybe a cow was stranded in the middle of the lake or something, or someone had a cow on the boat. But basically, they were saying that they were hearing mooing, and it was just mooing out in the middle of this lake, Lake Eufaula. I've also heard it on Ten Killer too. I've heard people talk about it on Ten Killer. I've heard people talk about it on the river, and it's just this faint mooing sound, And I told a story last week on the live about how the Department of Interior guys, saw that snake with those horns. And I'm going to just refer to them as snakes. I'm not going to use the names. I'm not going to really say, any creek names, tricky names. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to call them snakes. But it says, tribal cop told me a story about a Bigfoot knocking on their window when they were patrolling out. Dang. Yeah, they're out there. I know. I've heard stories of, tribal police, getting calls about them. But anyways, but these snakes, when it floods, is how it travels. That's how these snakes travel, because they can't just get on land. They're water beings. They're water, creatures, I guess you could say. But Lake Eufaula is real big about them. They have, I think there's more than one, but there's a king snake, and I know it by the creek name, but basically it's the king of all these snakes. And I was told growing up, that there's a story, and it's an old story, and it's about a boy who got kind of greedy, and he used to dive down in it for turtle shells. And boy, he wanted all the turtle shells. He wanted to have the nicest for their dances. He wanted it for the shakers. He was like, I got to have the nicest. I got to have the most. I got to have everything, And so he dives down and he's looking for these turtles that are kind of nestled away under the water and on top of the water. All of a sudden he gets took. He gets pulled down deeper than he wanted to be. And when he kind of comes into his senses, he looks around and he had been taken by this snake. And basically told, he's like, you need to respect our water and our the things that are in the water. And when he was down deep in this cavern, the snake brought him to the king of all snakes. And that's the creek name. And I'm not going to say it, but I'll call him the king of all snakes. And that king of the snake goes, I will give you all the turtle shells you need, but you have to respect the water. And the boy, scared, not sure what's going on, just agrees. He came up with the most shells anyone's ever had. But he made the agreement that you're going to respect the water. You are going to respect my home. And so I was, that's an old story that has been passed down a long time. And I've heard different iterations of that story, but that's the story the way I remember is told. That's an old creek story. And that's one of those things that I think about. I guess really when throughout the day you always think about stuff as you go on through the day, but that story kind of leads me to thinking about my family stories that I've heard. And I had a cousin of mine. He was driving home with his wife, and he noticed that water was real, because the Lake Eufaula, the water does kind of move a little bit. For whatever reason, it does kind of splash up on the shore sometimes. And when he was driving home one night with his wife, and he noticed that the water was splashing up real far. It was splashing up almost to the road. And that's another sign that those snakes are around, as the water moves. It almost parts, not quite all the way parts, but the water moves a lot. It moves, more than it should. And he saw what he thought he saw was the end of that snake slapping the side of that road, because that road on the Lake Eufaula, it has kind of rocks, and he thought he saw the edge of tail or end of a snake slapping against that rock bank of the road. But that's like I said, that story sticks out in my mind too. And the story, like I said, the story that I told on the Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation, that I was told by my other cousin, the same his sister actually was told about that. Or told me about that and what she saw, and she had told this story probably 5 or 6 years ago. But she was out at Eufaula Lake in Eufaula, Oklahoma, and she was pregnant, or she had a pregnant friend and the boyfriend, or another friend, and she was swimming in there, and kind of how the bank sits at Eufaula Lake is basically you'll have like a short, shallow area, and then it just drops off, and it drops all the way off, and you don't know how far it goes. She goes underwater real quick, and she's out kind of towards the edge of that kind of shallow area. All of a sudden, she kind of goes under, and she sees this face, and it was a snake's head, essentially coming up from that deep end. Well, her pregnant friend and the boyfriend, or the other friend. Now, I can't remember if it was boyfriend or if it was a friend, but I assume it was probably the boyfriend. Pulled her out of the water because that snake was going to take her. That's what he was there for, probably. Well, they get out of the water and they get out of there so fast. But that's another thing, too, that growing up, that I was told when you see this snake, was you're not supposed to talk about it for an extended period of time. And I had heard a year, I had heard 3 years, I had heard 5 years. But you're not supposed to talk about this. You're not supposed to talk about your encounters with this thing for about a year, at least a year. And, so to me, that's pretty interesting. That's pretty, I get, like I said, I really think about these, and, with these snakes, like I said, when I mentioned earlier, they travel through the floods. And I have my own personal experience with these snakes. And some of these stories I've told before on, other podcasts or other, platforms, but this is my own, and I'll share it. And so I was floating down the Illinois River one summer. And this summer was really a real bad summer. There was someone drowning every time I was on the river. I used to go every either Saturday or Sunday. And every time I'd go, someone would drown, either behind us or before or in front of us. And it usually happened towards the end of the day, like 3 or 4 o'clock, before the you're supposed to be out by like 6 or 7. But it happened usually kind of later part of the day, not in the early part. And we were floating down the river, and I was outside the raft. I was swimming next to the raft. And I remember, like I said, I have 2 or 3 of these stories, but I had been, kind of swimming outside the raft. And we're floating down the river, and this girl, and I could tell she wasn't really that great a swimmer because she had a life jacket on. Well, somehow the life jacket ended up not, I don't know if she got too hot in it because she wasn't swimming, I don't know, but the life jacket came off. And she falls in. Like a certain current hit her and she fell backwards. And she fell in. And I'm swimming next to her holding on to the raft. And so I see her fall in. And I'm the only one that sees her fall in. And I end up going to get her. And this is the deep part of that river. And I grab her. I catch her hand and I pull her up. And I pull her whole body up. And she kind of looks at me, and she said that something had grabbed her leg, and said something was pulling on her. And I'm trying to pull her back up so she doesn't drown. And I pull her up. I finally end up getting enough kind of leverage on a limb that was in the middle of the river, and I pulled her up and threw her back on the raft. And she looked at me. She said something was trying to grab. I think something was trying to pull me because I could not get myself up. And I think maybe it's just she wasn't a good swimmer, but she I ended up pulling her up, putting her all back on the raft, and she goes, "You saved my life. Something was pulling on me, and pulling me down when I went in." And that's something that I always used to kind of tell people when I'd be on the river is you need to be careful. If you don't know how to swim, stay in that raft or figure or wear a life jacket. But you just like you got to make sure you're safe on that river because that river can be unforgiving. And I've been out there in 110 degree heats, beat down, just brutal hot. But that Illinois River, and I can't quite remember the dates. I did some research after the fact. That same summer. So in 2000, I believe it was 2015 or 16. It was right before I graduated. There was a real bad summer, and this is the same summer I'm talking about, where people were drowning, and it was usually kids, older kids, and kind of. People that really weren't good swimmers were drowning every weekend, and I basically saved that girl from drowning. But as the summer went on, I had heard and seen on the news after we get off the river of people drowning. And one day we were out there, and this is towards the end of the summer, and I remember this little boy, what he looked like. He was a little blonde-headed boy. So we're going up the river, and I see that kid. He's playing on this kind of this really big log, but it was like a tree that had fallen over. It was on the bank, and then it had fallen into the river, and it kind of took off the side of the river. And he was a little blonde boy. He wasn't very tall, but real skinny. And I remember him. Well, we get up the river, and as we're going up the river, I saw something change about the water. And I noticed, I said, something's not right with this water. I could feel us not moving as fast. It was almost as if we didn't, we had started to have to paddle us. Like we came to a standstill, basically. So I get in the raft and I pull everybody to the side because I know the king's coming, is what I was kind of thinking. I was like, oh, this snake's coming. And so I pull all my people over to the bank. And I look out, and the side closest to the bank, the shallow end of that river, was going the normal way. The deeper end, which is off to the other side, was going the opposite way. So essentially, to the body, basically something really big was going through that water, and it was pushing that water the opposite way. And that's one of the tell signs that these snakes are in the water. Is that water goes opposite way, or it changes currents of water basically. And I pull my people over. I see that. And then we get off, we go on down. And I'm real spooked out after that. I didn't get in the water. I didn't feel comfortable. And so I tried to get my people back, quick as we could. Because like I said, I'm from Tahlequah. Been on that river and been around that river my entire life. And, been around creeks and stuff like that. And, eventually we got back. And when I looked at the news, and that little boy that I saw was drowned. He had drowned. And I found the news clip, the news article regarding that child, and I think about him sometimes. I didn't know the kid, but I think about him sometimes that non-natives they come into these places where it's almost sacred, like the Illinois River and that spot and that piece of land, and that goes all the way through Tahlequah, goes all the way down. Is really not I'd say sacred, but it's very spooky, but it's very it's important, I guess is what I'm looking at. And I remember that kid, and I remember that summer, and then that next following year, the next on down, it flooded. That was the historic flood that wiped out all those river companies and wiped out everything. And you guys can look that up. I think it's 2016 or 17. But like I said, I went and did all the research on that because sometimes memory just kind of fades a little bit. But yeah, I think about that a lot. Like, I saved that girl from drowning, and then, that little boy just didn't know, and a lot of times non-natives don't know. They don't know about these things. They don't know about these beings and these entities that rule the water and land and sky and all that stuff. But that Illinois River flooded that next following months to come. I can't remember how long or how far away, but it had flooded real bad. And there's different types of bodies of water that were around there. Once that river flooded, which those snakes can cause places to flood because that's how they travel. But another thing too that I've heard, around that same time was that Tenkiller had octopus, like an Oklahoma octopus was in there. And I think a lot of it too was that people were seeing the snake. Sometimes the snake can have multiple tails or multiple heads, just depending on the snake and the medicine that snake provides. Growing up, I used to hear a couple stories of medicine men, at those grounds. They'd be, using those. They would, and I heard, and I'll give some information away here, but they call it four corners, is what I was told. And they would basically drift those snakes to sleep. And those snakes will kind of do this little daze where they kind of close their eyes and they take the medicine off their horns. A story that was told to me by my grandpa, and it's one of those stories you hear as a child and you don't believe it. You're almost kind of shook by that. But basically, my grandpa had a friend whose family, basically, was at the grounds and they did things and was a part of those things and he one night, it was real late. He kind of heard something over to the side, kind of, and a lot of grounds are usually next to some sort of body of water, creek, whatever, That's usually that's where they're supposed to be, anyways. But that's what I was told, like I said. But and it just depends on tribes and all stuff. Like I know that's one thing too. I always see in a lot of our comments on Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservations. People say that ain't how it is. I'm over here in North whatever, to give them their tribe name and okay, everyone is a little bit different. Everybody's a little bit different. Everybody hears things different and understands things different. But so basically, my grandpa had this friend, and he had seen this ceremony happen down by a creek, and he was hiding, and he saw this big snake come out of the water, real giant, real like monster snake, and it was swaying when they were singing this song, and they ended up making that medicine for the grounds that year, and that's how they got their medicine that year. So it's really interesting how this stuff, is it happens. Like I said, I hear non-natives all the time. Oh, that stuff cannot be real. I can't believe it. That's like, that's just sometimes it ain't meant for you. Like I mentioned on an episode here recently, on Yellowstone, Rip the cowboy asked, I think it's Longbottom. I can't remember his name. His name's Mo. First name is Mo, and I can't think of he's Chief Rainwater's basically security guy. And I can't remember his name. It was Mo something. But he basically goes, maybe this ain't for you. I ain't got to tell you this ain't for you. And Rip kind of nods his head. But that's what I think of, when I hear non-natives say, oh, well, that can't be real. It's not, no, there's no chance, I said, it's just not for you. If this stuff was meant for you, you'd see it. I got let's answer a few questions or a few comments here before I continue with the kind of the legend of that. But I heard a story down in Orlando yesterday. Dang, okay. Russell, type in the chat if you want to come in and tell that story. I'll get you on again. Get you that second dose. Miss Amy, is this Creeks or Cherokees? So both Creeks and Cherokees, they do have snakes. Like, because we're kind of, I wouldn't say we're water people, but we were around a bunch of rivers, lakes, creeks. That's, especially here in Oklahoma, like Cherokees, we have so much lakes and so much creeks, it's ridiculous. And creeks, they're always around too. Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. So Russell Sun Eagle in the chat talking about OU losing last night. Man, we don't even need to talk about that. Man, we don't even need to be talking about that. Dang, you about to see me cry live on air? No, I was playing. But anyways, getting back to the snakes though, and that's one thing that these snakes were used for medicine, and the old Creeks and Cherokees, they used to use that. And, that's that's another thing that I think about, is if I put myself in that little boy's shoes, and kind of to finish the story, he was never really the same after that. He was he's like, I don't want to do that, because his people are from medicine. And that's kind of what you pass it on to the next generation. And he wanted no parts of that, absolutely no parts of that. And after that, he kind of went on to be a preacher, and went the other way, So I was, like I said, I always kind of put myself in that same type of thought, and if I saw one of these things, I've seen the water. I haven't actually seen the snakes. I've just seen the signs of them. Another story I have, kind of regarding me is when I was out on Eufaula Lake. We were out on this boat, and I have personally heard the mooing when they moo, when these snakes moo. And my friends I was with wanted to say, hey, we need to go save that cow, because the water was real low that time. It was real low, and the shore was kind of maybe one of those cows wander off, and they were swimming around, and my friends were like, let's go save the cow. And I'm like, no, we ain't saving. There ain't no cow there. It's not a cow. And I got kind of looked at, kind of crazy, and I just kind of said, no, we just need to go do what we're doing, and leave it alone. Just kind of hang out. But yeah, that's one thing that when I get talking about these snakes, I kind of always think back of. I always kind of think about a story that I was told. This story was told some years ago by a Seminole man he was from Florida, and he said that the snakes followed the Seminole, basically underground, and that's where we got those mounds. He said that there's mounds all the way from Florida, all the way to here in Oklahoma. And he says there's mounds all over the place. He said that's where those mounds come from, is those snakes were burrowing through there. And I thought that was pretty interesting, because I could see that, that they have the ability and they have the power to do that. And it's just real interesting. But do you guys have anything that you guys wanted to any topics you guys have or any questions you guys have in the chat? Drop those now. Russell, you sick for that, man. You a nasty man for that. Sooners did their best. The baby Sooners did their best, but but yeah, if you guys have any questions in the chat or any, I would like to, I'd like to maybe answer a question or if you want a topic or if you want to hear a story, if there's a certain topic story that you want to hear, I'm sure I got one for you. But kind of moving on from that, I had posted a video here on TikTok, and one thing that that is real prevalent is omens. And the story that I had posted on my TikTok, it's on there. It's on TikTok now. And if you're hearing this on the actual podcast side of this, which this will be released on Saturday, if you never catch it on YouTube, it'll be released. This live will be released on YouTube Saturday night at midnight or Sunday morning at midnight, and then also the audio version will be on released on that too as well. But I posted a video on TikTok, here on TikTok, and it was talking about a security guard at Saline Courthouse, and that he saw a real pretty girl sitting next to the water of this creek next to the courthouse. And he ended up telling his friend, and he ended up passing away a week later. And Chris Honka Hill, he had told a story on Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation where he had something similar like that. Where he had seen, his buddy had seen something, and his friend ended up telling Chris, and he ended up passing away a little bit of time later. And so those are around, and I thought, I was like, if you haven't seen that video or that story told, I can't remember who the actual storyteller was, and that's a pretty, not, I wouldn't say famous story, but it's a pretty prevalent story. When it comes to kind of death omens. Let's see here in the chat. Did you hear about the pyramids found with the ancient city in the Grand Canyon? Yeah, the Grand Canyon. That's one thing that I feel like people, we look at it as like this. Oh man, this is like one of the wonders of the world. But like we've never, like I feel like people just haven't, or scientists or archaeologists haven't really done their due diligence there. I believe there's a lot of stuff in there. There's been rumors for a lot of years that they found giant bones in there, and that's where they dumped the giant bones. I've heard that, and another kind of conspiracy that I think Russell mentioned. He's a dude. Russell's a deep diver, but he mentioned that the Grand Canyon basically leads all the way to Africa. That's kind of a crazy conspiracy. But the pyramids being found all the time out in all over the place. You look at, I think it's called Göbekli Tepe. Am I pronouncing that correctly? But that was found in Turkey. They had been doing digging, and they're starting to find out with all these ancient, predating the history that we know now. I guess it's before the Ice Age or after the Ice. One of the two. They're finding stuff older than that, and so something's not adding up. And what happened? What a lot of the mud flood conspiracy theorists think is that there was a mud flood. I think it just, I think what happened is nature is undefeated. Nature has never lost. It don't matter where you're at, where you're from. Nature will take over. And when they found Göbekli Tepe, when they found that, they started realizing there's something maybe underneath that. Like they built on top of the pyramids. And so, they found something over in South America with some of those. And, you just never truly know, what's out there. But that's a pretty good comment, like with the pyramids, because the pyramids, sometimes they predate even, like they predate everything. So who put those there? Who put those in action? How do they create those? We just truly never know. But let's see here. Hot broth. Some Christians I know believe the giant bones are dead Oh yeah, the dead of the fall or the fallen angels, basically. Um, uh, no, yeah, that's a true thing. That's a real thing. Um, now there's some hardcore people that I on YouTube that talk about this, and this is what they believe, and they will live and die by the Nephilim. That's fine, and you can believe whatever you want to believe. But my thought about it is there. I mean, in the Bible, it does say that these fallen angels mated with the what is it? The sons and daughters of man, of God, or whatever. And a lot of the talk about that is looking at it from a biblical perspective. I don't necessarily believe that giants were fallen angels. I think that maybe they might be offsprings, but I don't think that they're actual fallen angels. My thought is I think that they were here. God created them. They were here for a purpose, like we're here for a purpose, and the Christian God is a little bit different than my God. I believe my God isn't wasn't in a book, and everybody kind of has different thoughts on the Nephilim, but I don't really subscribe to a lot of that the Bible verses stuff like people do. People here in Deuteronomy 1:3 it says this and this. I'm good on that. Hey, Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. Tell us about the moon landing. With that statement, I'll ask a simple question: Why haven't we went back? If they can explain to me why we haven't went back, and technology is what it is today, I'll believe that the moon landing was real. Oh, and another one too was, dang, what if it's another comment is, what if it's Bigfoot's bones? If it is Bigfoot's bones, then they've thrown a lot of those into the sea. They got those out of here. Because that's one thing too. When you look at giants and you look at all that stuff, that's predating anything we know. They are not like Graham Hancock, which I have a lot of respect for. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast a few times. He has went out to all these sites and he has found so many of those bones, or not bones. I'm sorry, those large temples that fit giants, basically. They found hallways that were 11 foot tall, like no normal 6 foot tall guy, which people back in those old days were like 5'5". They were not 6 foot how they are now. But when I was talking to the park ranger today, he goes, "Well, why haven't we had?" Well, kind of got into a little bit of debate. He goes, "Well, why haven't we found scat?" I said, "Well, if we found scat, what do you think they'd do with it?" And he says, "Well, they test it." I said, "But who's they?" And he goes, "Well, I don't." He's like, "Well, maybe like he's a college or something." I said, "So if they found out Bigfoot was real and that a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, however tall these things are, 15 foot tall monkey was running through the woods, what would that do to your job?" He didn't really have an answer. I have heard a lot of stories of government cover-ups with those bones. And that's Bigfoot, that's giant bones, I believe in that. I believe in the cover-up. Because if you look at this is just a microcosm of what I believe. But you look at, I want to say there was a bird somewhere up in the Northwest, and they had to stop. And there was a certain territory that these birds lived. They were on the endangered species list. They shut down a logging in that area forever until forever. And that's just a bird. That's one species of bird. Does that affect us? I don't know. But you talk about a 15-foot tall, hairy, humanoid animal. You really think people are not going to go in the woods anymore? I know for a fact there'll be people that never touch. They will live their life in concrete jungles their entire life. I know people right now that would. You just got to think about that. That would hurt the logging industry because you can't now. You're cutting down the habitats. Now the PETA people will be out protesting that you're infringing upon these animals' lands. They're going to do the whole thing. So you got to look at it from that point of view too. Like, okay, they did it for this little bird. I mean, they tried to do it for the thylacine in, what was it, Tasmania in Australia. This dog-like animal, which, is extinct, maybe not. Those things got really good at hiding. There's been pictures of those things in the early 2000s. So, who really knows? But that's just my thought on it. I've heard too, that Christian God is the God of His own hand, or a God of His own land, like the times especially you've seen national. Dang. We had 4K video from the moon. Dang, you're not lying. One of the comments says basically we had 4K video in 1960 whatever. Cap. I'm gonna put my hat on right now. Cap. Ain't no way. What's that sound? Ain't no way. Ain't no effing way. Like no way. They're not. And they even got the audio too. Like, come on. We can barely. Some people can barely microwave their food. Ain't no way. Did you see the video on here from Las Vegas nightclub? I think it's about the spaceships. Those spaceships that they caught videos of above that nightclub. I'm going to say this. I don't think it's a UFO. I think it's our government. They do this from time to time. They'll do a little bit exposure. Another thing too that dropped was the Kennedy files. People were talking about that. That basically our government killed Kennedy. That dropped. So they had to throw some aliens out there a little bit. They had to make sure everybody was on their toes because all of the world's ending. Yeah, I seen that video of the UFO. I believe it. Like I said, I don't. The jury's still out on me for aliens. I'll be honest with you. Be honest with y'all. I've seen the Fifth Kind movie. I've seen these documentaries, and there's something about it just doesn't sit right with me. Like if I was an alien species, I'm taking over this planet. This planet's too beautiful not to have. Or another thing too, and this is something that like me and Russell talked about on his Okie podcast episode, his Halloween episode when I was on. We talked about maybe the spaceships we see is us. Another us. Maybe 100 years from now, a different dimension. Some pretty far out stuff, but maybe that's what it is, or and also to our government, they're about 150 years ahead in technology than we know of. Yeah, I've been cooking on that one for a while, that theory. No. But, I feel like, people that close their minds to stuff and they wall off. They don't believe anything. If you don't have an open mind on stuff, then, what are you doing? If you're not questioning, what's what, if it don't make sense, I'm the person that asks questions. It gets me in trouble. Yeah, and it is what it is, but I just don't understand how people can just live their life from iPhone to iPhone. Oh, I gotta get the newest iPhone. I gotta get the newest Jordans. I gotta get the newest this. Gotta get the newest that. I understand fashion. You make yourself feel good. You know what Deion Sanders said? You look good, you play good, you feel good, you play good. I understand that. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, it's a materialistic life that I just don't, I don't live. As I have these posters of these buffalo or the native tribes, and I got the ambiance lights on and with the buffalo in the back. No, I'm just playing, but no, people just don't think about this stuff. I think TikTok, and this is one thing about TikTok that I do like, is I think it's opening people's eyes to stuff. Like there's a possibility that, hey, we're catching these videos of these upright walking animals. We're catching these lights over a nightclub. I think it's opening people's eyes a little bit. I think what COVID did and what the government did with COVID, people are kind of like, I don't know about all that. People kind of waking up, but we are coming up at almost an hour. Let's see here. Dang, it's mood lighting. Yeah, I know. We out here vibing out. Wish I had some music softly playing in the background for y'all. No. Let's see here. As the $200 poster nailed to the wall with... No, that poster is like $35. Come on, big dog. The poster I have, if you guys, like I said, for you guys listening to the audio, go watch the video. I'm sitting here and you can see my beautiful face. Behind me is it's a replica of the actual print. But it's every civilized tribe, every nation, tribe known in I think it's North America. Yeah, North America all the way down to the Panhandle. Sorry, I had to look. I look at it every day. I look at tribes every day, but yeah, come on now. Russell's trying to do me dirty in the chat. Yeah, and the government wants TikTok gone. That's, I'm not saying TikTok's good. I mean, there's some dumb stuff on there. Like people are getting famous off dancing. You're getting famous off dancing. You're getting famous on doing dumb stuff. Like, I understand that, but YouTube's been around forever, and people that do dumb stuff can continue to do dumb stuff. Hey, he says it's the real deal. It's the vintage print. Dang, he's flaming. He's really trying to get me. He's trying to get me all. People thinking I got the real print behind me. Come on now. If you, like I said, if you see this. See that right there where my finger's pointing? The real print would not curve like that. Come on, big dog. Come on. Yeah, all this wokeness. Yeah, I mean, some of that wokeness stuff too does work. Like, not gonna lie, it does work. I'll keep it 100 with y'all. But some of it doesn't work. It doesn't. It just doesn't work, and it's not reality. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Dang, you should try to get off a famous TikTok dance. If y'all see my husky ass dancing, y'all know it's over. Y'all know y'all might as well go ahead and tune out. Never listen to another thing I got to say. I appreciate, let's see here. I can't read that name, but it says Dana. Butchering your name. I appreciate the rose. And I appreciate the follow. I really do. I appreciate that. Dang, Russell in here saying I got a pin to the buffalo hide. Yeah? Hey, you're lucky you ain't seen the actual skin rug. No, I was playing. But, yeah, Amy, you're not going to see me. Yeah, you're not going to see me doing that. That's wild. We're sitting at an hour. Give me, you guys, in the chat real quick. Give me a topic. I'll tell one more story. I know I've kind of bounced all over the place. Started with Yellowstone. Talked about a little bit of, where I work and the picture that I posted. Hit those likes too. Another thing too, subscribe to the podcast. Follow me on here. Share the podcast. Do help me out. I'm trying to grow this thing to, really gets to kind of do my own thing. It's always, I love being on Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation, but there's 4 of us. Sometimes people want to talk about certain things, and that's fine. I don't really have a problem with it. But there's things like conspiracies that I want to get to that this podcast is going to get to, like, no doubt. Eventually, we're going to get to cartoon conspiracies. We're going to get to all that stuff. But yeah, in the chat, give me something, give me a topic, and I'll lead us out with this story, and call it a night, I guess you could say. But you could follow me on here if you're listening to it on the audio version. One Man Band 918 is TikTok. On Facebook, Yahola Tiger. If you want to add me on Facebook, please send me a message and let me know that you listen to the podcast, and I'll accept it. I've had a few people do that. YouTube, Warcry Podcast, One Man Band. I've actually posted a little, or I almost said an LP story. My grandma told. I told that on the Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. I posted that. I was thinking about her the other day, and I thought I'd post it. Kind of thinking about her. I'm going to continue to tell stories. I have a plethora of different stories. A lot of times, too, is, you get to talking, you just, forget, you don't really think about it sometimes. And the snakes have been on my mind the last few days, months. I've been really thinking about it. Eventually we're going to do a full-fledged, maybe I'll add some more stories, maybe even a part 2. But let's get those likes up to 1,000. I'm getting out of here. I'm at 820. I know we did pretty well the first time. I just want to make sure, I just want to get those likes up. Got to be attention. Got to be what I hate. No, I'm just playing. But let's see here in the chat. No, Russell, I'm not going to talk about OU season no more. It's over. It's over. Oh, so tell the story of OU's ghost season. I guess the season that wasn't brutal. God, yeah, OU lost yesterday, guys. I'm pretty upset about that. But like I said, guys, go follow me everywhere you go. Everywhere. So everywhere it's available. The podcast, Warcry Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, YouTube. Eventually, I'll get to some other things. Right now, I'm going to try to hit those because those are the more popular ones, and that's kind of streaming services and stuff like that. Yeah, I am everywhere right now. I'm reading comments and getting distracted. But guys, I appreciate you tuning in to the live. If you hear this on the backside, on the other on YouTube, this will be coming, like I said, coming out Saturday night, Sunday morning, whatever. But I'll catch you guys on the next one, and have a good one.